Hi, my name is Benet Davetian, and I am going to be your guide. I'm not going to say instructor, I'm going to say your guide through this course on the Sociology of Organizations. Now, this being a web course, we don't meet each other. So I've recorded these lectures in order to summarize and guide you through the various chapters of the book that you'll be reading and which will constitute an important part of your written work and evaluation process. You will have received already quite a detailed outline which describes how the course operates and which also explains that the lectures which you will find at the YouTube site Sociological under the playlist Organizations are numbered and titled exactly according to the schedule in the outline. So if you have one in the schedule, that is the chapter that will be spoken of in the talk on YouTube, and that is the title that you should be looking for when reading that chapter. Now, speaking of chapters, this is the book we'll be using. It's called Understanding Organizations, and it's by Howard Loon. It's an excellent book. It's written clearly. In places there is some redundancy. Like there'll be a chapter and then another chapter repeats a little bit what was in the previous chapter. But this is a blessing because our memories being the way they are, it's good to have a bit of repetition, a bit of elliptical writing. So you're seeing what was before, repeat it, and then build on for what is coming up. Now let me speak to you about the technical aspects of these videos. I could have used the remote to stop and start the videos. I've chosen not to. I've chosen to do these videos exactly as they would be happening in class. You don't have a remote that stops the class and starts it again. If you have to pause to think, to collect your thoughts to continue, well, you do so. And that's what I'll be doing during these videos. The videos are being recorded on an iPad mini, a small mini iPad with all the bells and whistles, the retina display. It's got an amazing camera, but the program being used is called Movie Pro. It is not the camera program that comes with the iPad. This gives me more control on the saturations, and then the video is sent to iMovie, color corrected so everything is in red and dark as much as I can. I'm not a professional. And then upload it to YouTube. Every video takes about 3 hours of processing and uploading. It's a tiresome task. The speaking is wonderful. I love talking. That's no big deal. So let me introduce the course first. And I'm going to follow the outline, the first page of the outline in doing so. When we speak of organizations, we are speaking of profit, non-profit, and government organizations and institutions. They affect every aspect of society and of our lives. You can hardly get through a day without being affected, and I'm underlining affected, by some institution, by some organization. Look at you right now. You're sitting, taking a web course from a university, which is an organization. Just because it's a university, do not think that it's not an organization. An organization is not just the corporations. They are organizations, but we have profit and we have non-profit. And we have tons of different types and aspects which we need to understand and study. So a clear understanding of organizations not only broadens and deepens our understanding of society and culture, but very importantly, if you look at it from a skill set's point of view, it prepares us for what is to come in our lives. When you go out there, you're going to encounter so many, absolutely so many things, which may confuse you and may irritate you too, I mean, it's irritating dealing with some of the bureaucracies, some of the procedures, and some of the things that happen, the social psychology aspect of it, when two or more people come together to form a group. Because organizations consist of groups. No organization can function without one group or a whole bunch of groups working together, interacting within a network to achieve the goals of the organization. And let's hope the organization is smart enough to have clear goals that everybody can relate to. Now, let me just, in parentheses, tell you something about the sound of these videos. You may hear a little hum in the distance. That's a fan that's working. I'm using my home office to record these. The room that you see me sitting in is the room I literally live in. I do my writing here, I do my course management here. So there is a fan in the window that makes the air more breathable. It's circulating air, so I apologize. I need that to have the brain cells working. So just let it be in the back of your mind, it'll disappear very easily. So let me start with the first chapter, the introduction on organizations. As I said, we can't get away from it. There is no way. You'd have to go and live in a desert, not need electricity, not need even food, because that too is tied to some organization that's producing the food. You wouldn't even survive. So we are enabled, given power, as well as constrained by organizations. And we need to understand the relationship between the freedom we have because of the existence of organizations that keep our society fairly organized. See? These words are linked together. Organized organizations. And those aspects of them, Weber called it an iron cage when he spoke with bureaucracy. That everybody would be in a cage and you couldn't move. So there are aspects that restrain us too. Now, they tend to have certain qualities in common, regardless of them being profit or non-profit. They have a name. An organization has a name and it has a purpose, and it has a defined membership. Let us say an organization on environmental protection, which is a non-profit organization put there by the government, is not going to have stockbrokers managing the departments. Their membership is specialized, as stockbrokers would not be bringing in environmental specialists to advise them, because that could mess up the whole stock market. So you're either part of the organization or you're not. So there are clear demarcations, lines between the inside of the organization and the outside. And there's a certain amount of formality. The jobs are defined. The ranks are defined. For example, the manager, the assistant manager, all of these are defined in such a way that you know what job you have and what you're supposed to do. Now, in the 21st century, in our own century here, we have a lot of organizations that are less formal. We call these semi-formal organizations, where teams work together and where jobs are not that clearly defined, allowing people to be creative. This works better in the high-tech industry, but in industries that have a lot of rules and regulations to deal with, usually the job description is long and it's clear. You know what is expected of you. You go in and you start performing according to those requirements. An institution, when we talk of institutions and society, we're talking about the institutionalized society. Now, this can be an organization, but it doesn't need to be. It could even refer to our traditions. When we talk about institutional memory, for example, we are talking about the collective memory which our culture has and which defines the institutional, how shall I say, folkway, if I may use that word, of the society. A school, for example, is a formal organization. The educational system is the institution. See the difference? Schools are part of an institutionalized environment, but singularly on their own, they are specific organizations with the inside and the outside, the principal and the teachers and the students, and then the yard, the gates, etc., etc. In a business-friendly society, be really post-communist era societies which are friendly towards business, we would refer ourselves as the organizational society. This has been used very much by sociologists, and there are many books that use that even in their titles. And we also refer to the government, being that the government is so involved in trade and in regulating corporate behavior, we refer to the government as an organizational state. The roots of all this is in economic sociology. There is an immense bureaucratization and interconnection between the social, the political, and the economic spheres of society. So each one affects the other and is dependent and affected by the other. You have sort of like a field effect, if you want. So there's a break with the traditional local and a joining together with the more global, more regional, maybe more national, institutionalized environment, which we call the organizational society. Now, in the 17th to the 19th century, it was a different setup. Most businesses, most trades were family-based. Technologies of mass production did not exist yet, so craftsmen replaced the assembly lines that came later. They did things, they built things on their own. A chair would take one person, a craftsman, building it. But when they got the assembly lines in the 19th century, you'd have 4, 5, 6 people working to make that same chair. One would be working on one leg, and became a bit more boring, and people became more alienated from the products of their labor, as Karl Marx very wisely noticed and made a big deal about, the alienation of work. But it allowed many sources of investment and mechanical evolution, I call it, to come about, which has now brought us to this amazing high-tech society, which pretty well dictates the way we communicate with one another and the way we think and the way we get our information. The original factory model of organization was known as Fordism. This refers to Henry Ford. Production is taking place in a massive factory to allow the company to grow and to have the most efficient production that for a certain cost of labor and materials is producing the most profit and the most productivity. And the controlling individuals in these factories are salaried managers who are supervising. Sometimes they're called foremen, 4 persons, but there were very few women unless they were in sewing factories. Foremen, or 4-person, if you prefer, are a certain level of authority, supervising the workers, and above them you have other managers and eventually the owners of the factory at the top. So it's a very hierarchical model based on production efficiency. We'll speak of this more as the course progresses, but I just want to give you this introduction of how there have been historical changes as we've gone from home-based, craftsman-oriented production systems to massive workplaces. I mean, if you look at the 19th century, when industrialization suddenly came onto England, you would see rural, beautiful places suddenly within a week populated by these huge buildings belching smoke. Excuse me, I'm just coming out of a 4-week flu season, so I may cough here and there, but we'll manage through it. So the urbanization of society is very much based on efficiencies in production and the extension of the worker outside the family into a wage earning environment. There's also a change in the community, in the family. Whereas before, the family counted on support from other families, the extended family, if you want, aunts, uncles, mother, father, grandfathers. The families now become sort of a property of the organization. They have benefits, they have medical plans. So the role of the extended family as the protector becomes taken on by these new organizations, which end up being in an organizational state, which eventually becomes known as the social welfare state. The state starts taking on a huge role in the welfare of people. If you look at our present state, we have Medicare, we have Social Security, we have pensions, all of this, which prior to our age was really the responsibility of the family, becomes a state-run enterprise. And that's why we call it the welfare state. So the dramatic change between citizens and the states, that is a direct consequence of the change in organizations. And this change produces the institutionalized social welfare state, which is so very different, and in which the ideological issues and arguments are different also. We have gone away from a culture that has very clear answers on many moral, ethical issues to a culture which allows many voices to speak, and a culture that encourages to listen and consider the varying positions of different groups. So, the formal contracts that organizations operate on, you sign an employment contract very often when you start a job, start replacing the informal agreements that were known to exist between individuals dealing with each other. People who bartered with each other. The chairman who made a chair gave a chair to the butcher, and the butcher gave so many kilos of meat in return, and this was done on a handshake. It was fairly informal. But now we start heading into signed legal documents, and the interaction between government and industry increases, because it is government that regulates these contracts. So the government acts not only as a pathway to increased economic, social, and political activity, but also acts as the regulator of such activities. And because of the government's involvement, there were tremendous improvements. We have to give the state that in the 20th century. Child labor was eliminated. A lot of children used to work in the assembly lines in the 19th century. The poorhouses that housed people who were given a piece of cheese for working all day were outlawed. The charities that came into being late 19th century, early into the 20th century, the health and safety laws, the pensions, all of this allowed the middle class to grow in size and in influence. So as industrialization takes off, and as organizations and the state absorb this industrial spirit and start working with it, what we see is an emergence of a middle class because of increased wages, increased purchasing power, increased products that are available. And this middle class starts having a real influence, and there's a decrease or decline, if you want, of the workers that were already placed in the suburbs. We have an urbanization that follows. People moving to the big cities to have increased opportunities. So it is really end of 19th century, early 20th century, where we see this mass migration. And we see also in organizations, to finish up this first chapter, the appearance of the organizational chart. I think you'll find this in page 15 and 16. Take a look at it, it's quite interesting. Where you show very specifically the hierarchy of the company. Who reports to whom? Which units work together? In a way, an organization chart, it's less popular now, it's more free-flowing, but many companies still use it, and institutions, government especially, shows who reports to whom and who is responsible in the end. So we have the idea of going through channels. If you have a boss, you don't go above that boss. You get into trouble. You could make an enemy. You go first to the boss and say, I have an idea, and if the boss and you feel that the idea is good, your boss takes the idea to his boss, and his boss takes the idea to his boss, until hopefully a lot of good ideas die in that ladder of ego and power and influence, but that is the way organizations keep a certain order. So this is basically a summary of the first chapter, and your next video will be, of course, logically, the second chapter. It's good to be with you.